So, hello and a massive warm welcome to the Legal Brew. Now, this is one of our first episodes, and I'm very excited to bring this to you. My name's Jason Connolly. I'm the CEO of JMC Legal Recruitment, and this series is all designed to give you massive amounts of insight into the legal market, whether you're a seasoned lawyer or someone in university or just starting out. We're going to try and add as much value as we can, and we're also going to talk about topical things in the legal industry. So, one of our first guests is none other than our very own Sam Thompson, who heads up our in-house division. I'm going to get Sam to talk to us in a minute, introduce himself. What are we talking about today? We're going to be talking about all things to do with in-house legal recruitment, because it is probably one of the biggest, most requested phone calls we get is in regards to in-house. And Sam probably is the most popular person in the business who has the highest influx of calls about people wanting to talk to him about in-house legal recruitment. So we thought, what better thing to do for one of the first legal brews than to actually sit down and have a conversation about in-house. So Sam, tell us a bit about you and what you do.
Yeah, so I've been doing in-house legal recruitment for getting on for 3 years now. Um, a day to day will involve speaking to clients, bringing on new roles. They'll typically be legal counsel positions for various clients across various sectors, so renewable energy, finance, real estate, AI and software, construction. It really does vary in terms of the sector. Um, Another thing will be taking it, as Jason mentioned, taking a lot of calls from people who are interested in the roles that we've got on. And yeah, essentially just trying to find a perfect fit for each business for their in-house requirements, really. Um, the
And I must
roles will,
say, it's very different to recruit in private practice because I'm a private practice recruiter through and through. I've been doing that for over a decade. And it is one thing to recruit for a law firm, it is entirely different recruiting in house. The recruitment model is different. How you get the jobs is very different. Even the process through interviewing is very different. It's and I think sometimes people don't necessarily realize that from the outside looking in. So I can say myself that there's a lot of differences. What is a general interview process like, Sam, for in-house?
it can really depend. I think the more senior the role is, say for example, it's a general counsel role, it won't be out of the ordinary for it to be a 4 or 5 stage interview process. Maybe if it's a paralegal role, it could only be one interview stage. So it really depends on the hiring team. It depends on the priorities of the C-suite. So yeah, it can depend, but I'd say on average for a legal counsel, senior legal counsel position, it will tend to be about 3 stages. So yeah.
Interesting. So we get a lot of people contact us every single day wanting to know about firstly considerations and things to think about when going in-house. And a lot of candidates actually call up not necessarily knowing what they should be considering. So a lot of it is an educational exercise. What, from your take, Sam, from the work that you do, what do you think are considerations that people need to? Because I've got my own take on it, but what's your take? What do you think people need to consider when thinking about going in house?
Yeah. I think probably the key point is the difference between private practice lawyers being more kind of legal advisors. When you're going into an in-house role, you're very much a kind of business partner as well, a kind of business consultant. So you need to have that kind of commercial business savvy personality and way of working, because obviously in private practice you're targeted certain amounts, certain numbers, but in-house you're very much chipping away at different bits and bobs. So you may do commercial contracts, you may do a bit of compliance, you may be doing a bit of data protection, a bit of HR. It can really depend, and because of the nature of in-house businesses, you will be collaborating with various teams across the business as well. finance, HR. So you need to have good communication skills to be able to speak to these different departments. You just need to be easy to get along with. Um,
I think as well because in-house lawyers, and I think people sometimes from the outside looking in don't realise this, but normally the lawyers will be in a legal department or somewhere within the business that is at stakeholder level. Generally, that's where the lawyers tend to sit in the business, and because of that reason, I think that a lot of the time when it comes to private practice lawyers, what you're looking for is technical ability and you're looking for commerciability. It's those 2 points. Personality obviously is important, but in-house there is a myriad of different things. Everything from, I think from what you said, such as management. Has that person sat at the top of the business? Do they understand? Have they sat on a board? Do they know how to navigate that kind of layer of a business? And I think a lot of lawyers um don't necessarily get that experience. Then
yeah,
when they come to go to in-house jobs, they maybe perhaps can't get their head around why they're not a fit. Corporate legal counsel. I am a corporate lawyer. I've got lots of experience. Why am I not a good fit? But it's
yeah,
because there's such a wider level of skill set involved, which I guess is why a lot of in-house positions are always weighted to someone who knows what they're doing and someone who's been around the block a bit. I don't know about you, but I never see loads of roles coming out junior in-house. Do you?
yeah. Not particularly. I think one thing that businesses will have to consider is that look, they're making a quite a big financial investment when they're bringing someone in. So demonstrating that value of being a business consultant, not just a lawyer, is incredibly important if you are to land that first in-house role. It's that there's often a bit of I think it's hard. It can be more challenging for legal departments to kind of prove their value in an in-house setting due to there not being any targets. Um,
Mm.
and there can be a bit of push and pull between the legal department and the finance department, who will often um, you know tick off the role and give the legal team freedom to begin hiring. So yeah, couple of hurdles in the way that can
That
be
is
challenging
interesting because
at
there
the same
isn't
time.
targets. I guess the only way, well, one of the ways I guess why people start recruiting in-house in the first place is because if you've got a whopping spend on legal a year, however many hundreds of thousands you might have spent, it does make sense to, well, you would think, okay, rather than spend that 300 grand a year, we'll just bring in a lawyer to do it. And then I guess there's a cost saving there initially, but it's because you get a lot of roles coming from companies outside of the UK who are entering the UK as well. So some of the time it looks like that the individual setting up shop for you, for your clients, so to speak.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that has happened many times over the last year or so. Yeah, it can be. I think when a company is entering a new market, there's a lot of things for in-house lawyers to consider. Say, for example, a US tech firm opening up a branch in the UK, hiring a lawyer in the UK. That's another thing that lawyers will have to consider because a lot of the time, don't get me wrong, I know hybrid working has its positives, remote working has its positives, but people will want to spend a little bit of time with the legal team, even though they may be based elsewhere. So that's another consideration. If you are joining an international business and you are the only legal boots on the ground in the UK, that's another thing to consider as well.
I guess some of the considerations that I tell candidates, and I guess we both look at this. We're both legal recruiters, and we both effectively do the same job, but in-house is different, and it is different. What I always say to candidates when they're thinking about going in-house is the first thing is it really is a career decision. I think that if you're going to go in-house, is that where you want to be long term? Because like you said, Sam, as soon as you go in-house, you broaden out and you lose that specialism. And once you lose that specialism, you maybe lose your clients because you're not able to service them for that period you wasn't there. And then when you roll into that, you eradicate your billings history. The amount of times I've come up against in-house lawyers who want to go back to private practice, but it's been really challenging. A lot of the time as well, I always find that the salaries of in-house tend to outdo private practice. From a kind of up to a senior associate perspective. But then there is a sweet spot where you get as high as you can in legal counsel, and the only way you can surpass that is partnership. So there does
Yeah,
tend to be a glass ceiling. Sometimes it comes by virtue of the fact you're a legal counsel and you want the general counsel role, but there's only one general counsel. That general counsel isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So you're restricted by virtue of the fact you've hit a glass ceiling. That's very common in-house. But also you're restricted in terms of earnings up to as well. If that only place you can go to is general counsel, then you are limited in your earnings and your career progression. So that's one consideration. But I think it's about, like you said, what do you actually get joy from doing in your role? If you want to be someone that's kind of at the forefront of what a business is doing, be involved in deals and whatnot, and you really enjoy maybe having a more multifaceted role that has lots of different aspects, and so on, then in-house definitely could be the right thing for you.
yeah, it does. Yeah, in-house lawyers will often deal with a number of legal responsibilities, but at the same time, even though in private practice, what you're doing could be a bit more specific on the legal side of things. I guess the beauty of taking an in-house role is that you can actually align yourself with a business that is aligned with your own values and morals as well. So, look, if you're interested in tech, or you're interested in sports, or you're interested in renewable energy, you can focus solely on that. So
Mm.
even though yeah, the role itself won't be as specific as what you're getting up to in private practice, it will allow you to, I think, maybe find a bit more joy in your role. I'm a bit biased, but
Of course you're
I
biased.
know.
Of course you're biased.
So,
Private practice is better, I swear. Of course I'm going to say that because I'm biased. So I want to. Where was I going with this? Because you just brought up a really good point that I was just going to jump on the back of. Yes, I think it's about looking, and I've always said this, and I stand by this advice I give candidates that you made an interesting point. You were talking about if you want that specific experience, you just want to work in that sector, you want to be immersed in that. But I guess what you really need to consider is where do you want to actually be in 5, 10 years time? Do you have a plan, and where you eventually want to be, how does this role tie into that? I've always said to candidates sometimes it is very hard to think of 10 years in front. I do get that. Even I can't think 10 years in front. 10 years ago, I didn't even own this business. Who would have thought? So it is very hard to sometimes look at things, but you might think to yourself, okay, if long term I want to be a general counsel, or I want to be at the head of a business, then fine. Of course, in-house makes sense. But if your long-term aspiration is to be a partner at a top whatever firm, the problem then is, does that feed into it? I always think about where you want to be in 5, 10 years time and reverse engineer it. Does that next role effectively put you on track to that?
yeah. No, you're right. And look, I think in-house lawyers aren't necessarily limited to just general counsel being the top end. I think moving in-house at kind of 6, 7 PQE level at a senior counsel role, you're moving up to associate GC, head of legal, GC. And if you've then spent about 10, 12 years in-house being a business consultant, speaking to all different departments of the business, it naturally leads people into C-suite positions, um, COO, what CEO, whatever it may be. I think that exposure to the wider business
Mm.
allows you to do that. So there isn't really a limit of where you can get to.
That's interesting. I
Um,
hadn't considered that necessarily, that lawyers move into those roles, but I guess, a lawyer is a very safe pair of hands. They're a good pair of eyes, and they're someone that I guess you want on a board if they have those other soft skill attributes that are going
yeah,
to lend themselves well to a board. Very interesting. So yeah, I'm wrong in what I'm saying. If you are someone that can really bat it out the park, then you could find yourself on a board of a very nice company. That's
it's not for
interesting.
everyone. It's not for everyone, but it is
It
it is doable. You got to be maybe cut from a bit of a different cloth. I don't know, but yeah, it's definitely achievable. But yeah, like any C-suite role, it's yeah, obviously the competition's quite
Well,
ridiculous.
yeah,
But
you've got to. I think, do you know what? We'll have to do a whole nother podcast about advice on how to progress in your career and how to be strategic, how to exceed in business. Honestly, the topic ideas are coming to me in abundance now we've started this. So the in-house legal market in general and why it's grown so quickly. I remember I've been in this industry now for 12 years. And back then, it was, I say back then, like it was decades ago, but back then, the in house legal recruitment market was a market, but it has grown and grown and grown and grown to such a point that I think just before the pandemic, there wasn't barely a week that went by where I wasn't asked to comment on the speed of the growth of the market, or there was a big article that came out about it. It was really topical, and it still seems to be growing so quickly. I'm going to give my reason on why I think that, and then I'll come to you. But for me, I think the obvious one is the fact that it's a cost saving exercise. And I think businesses are looking at their relationship with lawyers very differently these days. I think the service offering that people look for is a lot more. And I think with the world and technology and whatnot, I think that people are looking at much different and innovative ways all the time of doing things. And I think the ways that work to the past are no longer the ways that work in the future. So I think part of it's being driven by that. I also think that the fast changing regulatory landscape of the world we live in now, it is meaning that companies are looking very closely at their legal departments, which in turn I think is fueling this growth as well. What's your take on it, Sam? Because obviously you've not been in the industry as long as I have, so your perception of its growth is obviously going to be different to my perception. But what's your thoughts on it?
yeah, I think the in-house market can I feel like it's quite reflective of the job market in general. I think when the economy is doing well and businesses are doing well, when there's more money coming in, then conversations can be had to kind of reinforce the legal team, and that obviously differs from sector to sector as well. Um, for example, the construction sector has been struggling a bit since Brexit. Import costs have really given it a bit of a tough time. Whereas on the flip side, as I think you touched on, software companies who are utilizing AI are doing really well. Obviously, renewable energy is on a nice kind of upward gradient at the moment. So it can depend on sector to sector and how the economy is doing in general. I think if you look on the opposite to renewable energy, so traditional oil and gas, the demand is obviously still there worldwide, but it is on a very kind of slow decline. When I say decline, I mean an incremental decline. But I think as the years go on, renewable energy is gonna just overtake it at some point. But so yeah, it really depends sector to sector. But as you say, I've only been doing it for 3 years. So
Oh no, I wasn't meaning to put your experience down. I was just trying to say that I'm an old man in comparison to Sam. 3 years in recruitment is like dog years anyway. It ages you dreadfully.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of grey hairs recently.
Oh no, well, don't worry. I was losing hair. That's not as bad. I think you'll make a good silver fox. But I'm digressing.
Cheers.
It is interesting. I think the sectors, and it's. I think one thing I always find really interesting about recruitment is it very much does mirror the real world and what's going on in the world, the trends in sectors where we're going as not just a country but as a society. I even remember back in the pandemic. I was very quick to predict the practice areas. And it is quite interesting when you see how the trends and where they're coming from. I think you mentioned AI and software, and we couldn't not do this episode today without talking about technology, AI, legal tech. I was only the other day approached by the Telegraph to talk about what impact is AI having at law firms, and law firms are adapting it massively. Even I think it's don't quote me on this, but I think it's Linklaters have just released their first well, they're the first law firm to actually have developed their own autonomous kind of chat GBT style AI bot. And it shows,
Wow.
what is possible out there. I think, for things like document review, it's already having a massive impact. I remember back in years ago, we would recruit. It's called Layla, the system that Linklaters have developed. That's it, Layla. But yeah, I remember years ago recruiting teams and teams of document reviews, but now a lot of that is getting done. Where AI is taking a big part of that. Tell us about your thoughts, feelings, what you're seeing, what's going on in your sector within all things technology, Sam.
Yeah. Yeah, just to touch on a point you mentioned there. As as helpful as the legal tech and AI stuff is, um, particularly for in-house teams, it has unfortunately resulted in quite a few redundancies for contracts managers. So you've got a AI bot kind of keeping on top of all the contracts management systems. But yeah, I've had quite a few conversations over the last 9 or 10 months or so where in-house teams are really utilizing this software. So look, it may save a bit of money for in-house teams, but contracts managers I think are going to be well are already to start are already starting to be on the kind of negative end of that. So I think for those guys, it's important to think about where else their skills can be utilized if they do want to qualify to become lawyers, legal counsels. Then this will obviously open up a different option for them. But it's definitely increased the competition for contracts managers at the moment, and I don't think that shows any signs of slowing down. But I think a pretty important thing to think about with AI is the kind of repercussions that in-house counsel will have to have a think about, because look, there's a lot of data protection and compliance things to consider with the AI with AI in general. It's obviously an ever evolving it's an ever evolving
With the pace of,
enigma, really.
yeah, it's crazy.
So it's important for some of these kind of tech and AI lawyers to kind of try and stay one step ahead, because I was listening to a podcast a couple of months ago, and the one of the chaps on there mentioned that I think it was in 20 or 30 years time, the most intelligent AI bot is going to be about 10,000 times more intelligent than the average human. So we need to
I
the
know.
lawyers need to keep on top of it just to make sure that's regulated and
Well, it's going to throw up,
not
I
going too
think,
far.
so many regulatory issues over staff within businesses using it. How does that work? We're coming up to I don't want to say a scary time and being negative, but it is a time of so much change. Even in the systems we're seeing in terms of recruitment, it's every week it feels like there's another feature or latest thing. You really do need to keep up because it's like anything, you've got to keep up to date with things that are, really affecting the world that we live in. Can you imagine the recruitment consultant that didn't keep up with the internet when the mailbox started drying up one day? Would have been awful. But in all seriousness, I think that it's the pace of change is going so quickly. There's not a week that goes by where we're moving like that in terms of technology now, and I can totally understand why it's happening to um, contract managers. And I do ask myself the question on, is it going to create the same amount of jobs at the other end? But yeah, I guess we will wait and see what happens there. So competition for in-house lawyers, 0 to 5 years PQE, trying to land their first in-house role. I'm going to ask you about this because you're going to know all about this. But I know the competition from my side. I know the competition is steep because, like we just said, there's not as many roles at that level. But I think this is going to be a really helpful point for a lot of people who are going to be listening to this, thinking, okay, I want to go in-house now. This is where I want to be. I want to go on that trajectory. Talk to us about the competition then. What would you say it's like, and what advice would you give to candidates of that level wanting to try and crack into the sector?
Yeah, it's tough in all honesty. I think linking it back to someone we mentioned earlier on, with these in-house hires being a kind of a business investment, um, teams will often like lawyers to come in, and don't get me wrong, they will be 9 times out of 10 working in a team, um, but they will like you to be able to work fairly autonomously. And businesses will really have to kind of justify that to finance teams. So I think spending a few years, maybe 3 or 4 years in private practice will put you in pretty good stead to learn
Mm,
to then go into your first legal counsel position. Don't get me wrong, there are junior counsel positions out there, but they are few and far between. And I think hiring for those positions due to the competition being so high is fairly straightforward for businesses. So, for example, it's junior in-house counsel, 0 to 3 PQE. We won't typically get instructed on roles like that either because it's a fairly straightforward process for a lot of these in-house teams. Um, a lot of hiring managers, I think, especially ones who have spent a good few years in private practice, they
mhm.
will often like to see that lawyers have kind of earned their stripes in private practice for a while. On the other hand, if you've trained in house,
Mm,
um, which I know it doesn't happen too often, but that may say, for example, you trained in house, you're 2 or 3 PQE, that could put you on the same kind of level of value as a 5 to 6 PQE private practice lawyer.
mm, yeah.
So it's challenging. It's incredibly competitive. Landing a kind of junior counsel position. So my advice would be to people looking for that. Look, if you are 100% determined to find an in-house position between kind of 0 to 4, 0 to 5 PQE, be ready for a lot of setbacks. It's not going to be a fast process. You'll get knocked down a lot of times. Um,
But get back up and keep going if you want to
keep
get in
going, keep
there.
going. But
Yes.
it is a tough one, and I think spending a bit more, spending at least kind of 3, 4 years in private practice will allow you to get to the level where you can, you can come into a legal counsel role, you can
Mm.
demonstrate your value, you can maybe build up a bit more of that commerciality. You can maybe get one or two secondments under your belt as
Do you know what
well.
you just took exactly what I was going to say next out my mouth there about secondments. That's can you get better experience than being put inside of a client's team? If people, I think what people need to do as well. I'm a big fan of saying to candidates to take control of your career. If you want to go to a certain place or you want to get a certain level of experience, don't necessarily wait for the opportunity to come knocking at your door. Take control of things. Put yourself in the driving seat in your appraisal. What's your relationship with your line manager like? How can you make sure if you need to get a certain type of experience or you want to go in house, are you pushing for that? Candidates that take or people in general that take control of their careers and their lives, do go further than waiting for it to come to them. So I think a lot, can be done. I'd also say that if that's a desire, that's somewhere you want to go. We live in a world now where on LinkedIn, why not tap up a legal counsel in a company you work in, that works in a company you want to work in, and ask them do they go to any networking groups or whatever it might be. This does all come down to sometimes who you know as well. So having a good network, don't wait till you're 4 years PQE and then suddenly decide you want now's the time. If you can think about that a couple of years before, then you can start, moving pieces of the chessboard to get you in a better position. So I think this has been really, I hope this has been really helpful. Sam, thank you for coming on to one of our first legal brews to talk about all things in-house.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
We're going to try and persuade you to come back again. We haven't let you off. We're thinking this is just a Easterly update.
Yeah, yeah, maybe do it quarterly or something.
Thank you.